Today, we're evaluating a regression strategy. We're going to start off with $110 inside. The first hit's going to win 35, and then we'll drop the bets down to $88 inside. The second hit's going to win $28, and then we're going to drop down again to $66 inside. At that point, our lowest bet is going to be $15, and we're going to assume that that's a table minimum. After that, we're just going to have the bots collect $21 for each hit. In the real world, you probably want to start some pressing strategy with those winnings, but we're not going to do that today. We're just going to get a baseline going. But let me know in the comments what you would do at this point, and I'll simulate the version that gets the most likes. This was submitted on my website by John B. almost a year ago, so I do apologize that it took so long, but let's dive in and look at some of the data right now. Here's the simulation report. This is what you get when you order a custom simulation from me. We're going to start by looking at the statistics on the simulation run. We ran 100,000 bots. That's what I programmed to run the strategy. We played for 10 hands per bot and then stopped. That means we have 1 million hands total in our data set. And that equates to a little over 8.5 million throws of the dice. And the reason that it's 8.5 million throws of the dice is because each shooter, on average, will hang onto the dice for 8.53 throws. The 100,000 bots, they bet a total of $236 million. They won a total of $77.5 million, lost just over $81 million, and the difference between that is a house take of almost $3.6 million. And together, that's an overall house edge of 1.523%. Next, we'll look at the outcomes on those 1 million individual hands that the bots played. On those, the bots won 42.2% of the hands, which means they won any amount of money at all. They lost the other 57.8%. But what's more important than how often they won was how much they won. So we can look at that in this hand profit and loss session. Now look at this, the median is just $3 lost. That means half the bots lost more than $3 and the other half lost less than $3 or won money. The middle 50% of bots, the ones that are most likely representative of what you might experience when you go into the casino, is between a loss of $53 to a win of $39. So pretty tightly packed right around zero. The middle 90% of the bots had a loss between $110 all the way up to a win of $165. And $110 is the most that any bots could lose in a hand because that's what they're outlaying for every single hand. Now, the maximum one, these rare, really nice wins, was $942. And that's from those really long shooters where they're collecting $21, $21, $21. So it would be really interesting to see what would happen if this strategy had a pressing element to it. Most of us aren't going to play craps for one shooter. So what I did is I had the bots play for 10 consecutive shooters and I called that a session. This is how they did on those sessions. 42.8% won some money, while 56.9% lost some money, and we have just a handful of pushes where they neither lost or won any money whatsoever. This time the median is a loss of $50. The middle 50% of outcomes is between a loss of $241 all the way up to a win of $152. The middle 90% is between $489 to $469, and then the full range is between a loss of just under $1,000 up to a maximum win of $1,470. Down below we have the histogram, so on the x-axis we have the amount won and lost. On the y-axis, the percent of bots that won or lost that much. You can see that it's shifted just a little bit south of zero because, again, there is a house edge. So in general, these sessions are going to lose some money, and that shifts it over. But you can see that there's a fairly nice tail here that goes almost to $1,500, as we saw. That's correlated right here. And I think we really would extend that tail if we did have a pressing strategy. The session duration chart really shows the effect of those really long, hot shooters. On the x-axis, we have the number of throws in the session. On the y-axis, we have the amount won or lost. And look at that trend. as the sessions are longer with more throws, you get to a point where you're basically guaranteed the bots or win. So very, very strong correlation. Longer sessions, longer shooters are going to win a lot more money with this strategy. So how much did our bots need to be able to play this strategy? The way that I do this is I calculate the amount that they laid out of their own pocket to play this particular strategy. So every time they're making a bet, they're either making it from fresh money or they're going to make it from money that they previously won or money that they previously had on the table, but then they took down because they regressed from that. The minimum outlay is $110. Looks like just about 1 out of every 5 was never going to need more than that $110 throughout their entire session. The median, $273. The 75th percentile gets up to about $400. 95th percentile gets up to $600. So this is your guideline. If you wanted to play this strategy over 10 shooters, this is what really tells you how much you might need to be able to survive that long. Now, if you wanted to be better than 95% of the bots, I would have at least $600 buy-in to be able to survive for that long, to be able to make those full 10 shooters. The return on outlay tells us how much the bots were able to multiply their money. 22.5% were able to double their money, 12.7% tripled, drops down to 7.3, then 4% for 4 and 5 times, and just under 0.1% were able to 10x their money. That's essentially 1 out of every 1,000 that were able to take whatever the money they outlaid and were able to get 10 times that amount. The betting power tells us how much the bots were able to play for any individual buy-in. And here we can see for every $100 that they bought in for, they were able to make $790 in total bets. So this is the metric. You want to see a higher number here if you want longer duration at the table. We're going to see a little bit more of that later in the video as well. This is a strategy that does best on hot tables. Look at this. Hot tables, 92.8% win rate. Choppy tables, just a 39% win rate. Cold tables, 1.4% win rate. The only thing I gotta let you know though, I don't think that there's any way that you can tell if a table is hot, choppy, or cold before you roll the dice. But this is a really good way to understand how a strategy behaves, and this is definitely a hot table strategy. Let's run through some metrics on the playing experience. Hit frequency, 35.2%. That means on 35.2% of the throws, at least one bet won for these bots. Loss frequency, 11.7%. That means on 11.7% of the throws, the bots lost a bet. Those, of course, are the 7 outs, which is where this strategy loses money. Hedge frequency, exactly 0. There's no hedging in this strategy whatsoever. And volatility. This is a mild volatility strategy. There aren't a lot of huge wins and huge losses. And that's mainly because you're essentially just collecting, anywhere from $35 to $21 each time. And if you lose, the worst you can lose is the full set of $110. How many of the bots were able to hold on to their profit? Well, almost 6% were profitable the entire time. They won right up front and they stayed profitable for their entire session. 4% were down, which means they started losing money and they never recovered. They just lost money throughout their entire session. Almost 30% were recovered. So what that means is they started off going down and then they were able to recover. We're going to look at some of the metrics on that next. And almost 50% gave back some profits. So those are the bots that they started off winning some money, they kept playing, and they ended up giving back the profits and ending at or below 0. And there were about 12.5% that were somewhere in the middle. They went up, they went down, they went back and forth a few times. So let's dive into that recovered section. This is how much they actually recovered. So the minimum that any bot recovered was $1. Median, again, that's the 50% mark, $109. The maximum, $553. And we can actually look at this one. This is the trip that bot took. It was bot number 17,251. What they did is they ended up going down all the way down here to $553 and then had a really nice session, was able to get back even to a little bit of a win, but gave it up on that last 7 out. On the negative side, this is where more of the bots ended up, almost 48,000 bots. The minimum that they gave back was $1, median $105, very similar to what we saw in the last chart. The maximum that they gave back was $600. This is the bot that did that. This was bot 88,340. Had a great session, and look at that, all the way up to $600, and then just crashed and gave it all back. Now, remember, I'm pointing this out just because I think it's entertaining. This is the 1 out of 100,000 bots that did this. This is the worst one out of 100,000. But it is interesting to see the journey that these bots went on. I don't normally show this in the videos, but I'm going to show it to you this time. This table tells us how many points these shooters were able to set and were able to make. And this is pretty interesting because when you look at 1 point set, 100% of the shooters are going to set a point, right? That's just the nature of the game. You're not going to 7 out until you set a point, but only 40.6% even make that first point. What about 2 points? Well, 40.6% set to at least 2 points, but only 16.5% actually make that second point. And you can see the numbers decline here. These are essentially the same every time we do a simulation because that's just the nature of the craps game. If you're interested in this kind of information and going in a little more depth, I wrote a guide called The Shooter's Edge. It's available for free on my website at the address in the comments below, or there might be a QR code in the video. This chart tells us how long it took for the bots to be in profit for any given shooter. And this is always interesting on regression strategies because they're pulling back some of the money, which means they've locked in more of the profit earlier. So you can see here, if we look at this, on the x-axis, we have the throw number, and on the y-axis, we have the percentage of bots that are in profit. And you can see at the 7th throw that 50% of the bots playing the strategy are in profit. And by the 11th row, 90% of the bots are in profit. If your goal is to get to a profit as quickly as possible, definitely consider regression strategies because you're definitely locking in the profit. That's all I have for you today. I hope you found this interesting. If you haven't already, please like the video and give me a subscribe. It helps my channel so much, and I really appreciate it. And until next time, have great luck at the table, and thanks for watching.